Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. Congressman Lloyd Doggett, Democrat from Texas, becomes the first sitting Democratic member of Congress to call on President Joe Biden to make what he acknowledges is a painful and difficult decision to withdraw from this year's presidential election, saying about last week's debate with Republican candidate Donald Trump, instead of reassuring voters, the president failed to effectively defend his many accomplishments and expose Trump's many lies. We'll hear reaction from the White House press secretary. President Biden today briefed at the Washington, D.C. Emergency Operations Center about extreme weather, including the heat wave across the U.S. and the Category 5 hurricane in the Caribbean, and talking about a proposed Labor Department rule to create the first-ever standards to protect workers from extreme heat. A federal judge puts a hold on the president's pause on new permits for liquefied natural gas, or LNG, exports, a pause the president justified in part due to climate effects of the greenhouse gas. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, applauds the judge's action. $500 million in grants from the 2022 CHIPS and Science Act announced to create a dozen technology hubs around the country. Haiti's new prime minister meets in Washington with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, while the newly arrived police from Kenya help patrol the streets of Haiti's capital, the streets that have been controlled by armed gangs for a year and a half. UN Senior Coordinator for Aid to Gaza briefs the UN Security Council on the war between Israel and Hamas. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is at the Pentagon with Ukraine's Minister of Defense, announcing another multi-billion-dollar aid package coming soon. And today is the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Story from the Texas Tribune. Congressman Lloyd Doggett, Democrat, called on President Joe Biden to step down as his party's nominee for the White House on Tuesday, citing the president's poor performance at a debate against former President Donald Trump last week. Doggett said in a statement, President Biden has continued to run substantially behind Democratic senators in key states and in most polls has trailed Donald Trump. I had hoped that the debate would provide some momentum to change that. It did not. Instead of reassuring voters, the president failed to effectively defend his many accomplishments and expose Trump's many lies. That was from the Texas Tribune. And a New York Times article today begins, in the weeks and months before President Biden's politically devastating performance on the debate stage in Atlanta, several current and former officials and others who encountered him behind closed doors noticed that he increasingly appeared confused or listless, or would lose the thread of conversations. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, asked about that today during her news conference at the White House.
We just posted a story, which probably I'm not sure you've seen because we just posted it in the middle of the briefing, but in which many people that we've talked to describe an accelerating series of episodes, moments when, over the course of the last several weeks, the president appeared confused or listless or would lose the thread of a conversation in private meetings at the G7, in Normandy, at the White House. Not all the time, not saying that that's the way he is all the time and that there's clearly moments people say that he's forceful and with it and all of that. But these people suggest that what happened, what Americans saw at the debate, has a precursor. What do you say to that?
So I want to be mindful in respect to reporting. I have not read it. I have not seen it, so it's hard for me to respond to it directly. But what I can speak to more broadly is that I have engagement with the president pretty regularly. What I see is a strong, resolute president who's always willing and able to work on behalf of the American people. I do not know who these folks are that you speak of, so it's hard for me to talk about that and to speak to that. I can just speak to my experience and go back again on the president's record and what he's been able to deliver on behalf of the American people. So I do want to be mindful.
I guess just one follow-up.
Sure.
Is 50 million plus Americans saw the debate last Thursday. They get a very different story from you. You just described a very different sounding president. Obviously, other administration officials described him very differently than what people saw. How do you reconcile those two versions of a president, one who appeared the way they did to millions of people and the other who appears always to be, sort of very forceful and not have any of those?
I mean, look, the president spoke to this. You heard me speak to this. We believe, and others have said this, not just me, other folks who have been on networks and also obviously has spoken to all of you, is it was a 90-minute debate. It was a bad night. That's what we believe it to be. We're not taking away what people saw. We're just not. That is, want to be very clear about that. We want to also make sure people understand that the president realizes. I keep saying this over and over again. He said he's not as young as he used to be, and he has addressed this over and over and over again. But you saw him last night, right? You saw him last night. You saw him at the rally. You saw him at the watch parties. There's been many instances. State of the Union. You saw him take on Republicans by himself, and what was happening back and forth. In the State of the Union. There has been also many instances where the president has really showed his strength and resolute that all of you have seen and commented about it, and so I think we cannot forget that as well. And we also heard from President Obama, who himself has said his first debate wasn't great. He talked about that, and most incumbents, their first debates aren't great. And so, look, we're going to continue to build on the unprecedented record by continuing to fight for the American people. That is our commitment, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, during her news conference today in the White House briefing room, she was also asked whether President Biden had taken any cold medicine before the debate, which could have made him drowsy, and she said no. And she laid out the schedule for President Biden the next couple of days. On Wednesday, he'll be meeting both in person and remotely with Democratic governors. On Friday, after the 4th of July holiday, he'll be heading to Madison, Wisconsin to campaign. On Sunday, he and the First Lady will travel to Philadelphia. And also on Friday, he'll sit down with a one-on-one interview with ABC News anchor George Stephanopoulos. And ABC News saying that a first look of that will air on the Friday edition of World News Tonight with David Muir, with portions airing on Saturday and Sunday on Good Morning America, and the extended interview will air Sunday on This Week and Monday's episode of Good Morning America. U.S. House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, and the former Assistant Democratic Leader of the House, James Clyburn of South Carolina, were both interviewed today on MSNBC about President Biden's debate, his future as president, and his candidacy for re-election. First, Nancy Pelosi.
Well, you asked me to speak from my experience, and my experience with Joe Biden is that in all the legislation that we passed to save the country with the rescue package, money in people's pockets, shots in their arms, children in school, people back to work, with the child tax credit, with the issues that were in the infrastructure bill, rebuilding the infrastructure of America in a very universal way where people can participate in those decisions. The TRIPS and Science Act to make us self-sufficient in the world, the PACT Act to honor the service of our veterans and help those who may have been affected by burn pits. The list goes on, and then the IRA. So we have all these things that he was masterful in helping to orchestrate, to write, and to pass. So he has a vision, he has knowledge, he has judgment, he has a strategic thinking, and the rest. He has a bad night. Now, again, I think it's a legitimate question to say, is this an episode or is this a condition? And so when people ask that question, it's completely legitimate of both candidates. Because what we saw on the other side was a lying of Justin. I tore up his speech when he lied to the Congress on every single page of his State of the Union. We should be tearing up what he said the other day because it was a pack of lies. And it's very hard to debate somebody when you have to undo or debunk everything they're saying. But again, arguably, I think that both candidates owe whatever test you want to put them to in terms of their mental acuity and their health. Both of them.
House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, on MSNBC, the Andrea Mitchell program. Congressman James Clyburn, Democrat from South Carolina, former Assistant Democratic Leader also interviewed today on that network, saying he supports President Biden's reelection, but if the president were to take himself out of the running for the nomination, Congressman Clyburn said he supports Vice President Kamala Harris becoming the nominee.
How would you feel if there is a decision for him to step down, if he decides that, and he has to decide that? Or if the party pressures him to do that? How would you feel if they worked around and tried to go around Kamala Harris because of her lack of high poll numbers and popularity and broadly based? Do you think it's hers to have if it is not his?
I will support her if he were to step aside. But I want to support her going forward at some time in the future. I want this ticket to continue to be Biden-Harris, and then we'll see what happens after the next election. No, this party should not in any way do anything to work around Ms. Harris. We should do everything we can to bolster her, whether it's in second place or at the top of the ticket.
Congressman James Clyburn, Democrat from South Carolina, on MSNBC. The House and Senate are not in session in Washington for this holiday week. The future of President Biden's candidacy and presidency also came up today with the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He was there for the groundbreaking of a new infrastructure project, and standing on the side of the road in an orange safety vest and hard hat, he was interviewed by the national political reporter for Spectrum News, Taylor Popolars, who posted a clip.
As a member of the president's cabinet, you, of course, get to interact with him in a lot of ways that the general public does not. What's your message to folks right now who are worried about both the president's age and his ability to serve for another 4 years?
You know, the president, the boss that I work for, is a focused and disciplined leader, and you can tell from the results that we've gotten. No modern president has been able to deliver as many achievements as he did really in his first 2 years alone, including, of course, this historic infrastructure package, but also the legislation bringing manufacturing jobs back to places like where I grew up in northern Indiana, the benefits for veterans, the reduction in the cost of insulin, you name it. I think in any job, you want to be judged on the results that you deliver. And that's, I think, the part of the message that we're bringing as we hit the road, pointing up these great projects.
And when you're behind closed doors with him, is there anything you want to share with the public who might have seen his debate performance and said, I'm a bit worried, especially if they support something like this infrastructure law, but they wonder if he could do the next 4 years?
Look, when I'm in a room with him, it's a lot like what America saw on the night of the State of the Union address. You've got a leader who's very focused, knows what he cares about, holds everybody who works for him, all of us, to a very high standard, and is focused on getting things done, not the noise, the chaos, the divisiveness, but bringing people together.
Two more quick questions for you. In your capacity as a cabinet member, there's growing rumblings from Republicans in Congress about invoking the 25th Amendment and calling on the vice president to do that. What do you think about that, especially as you're out here trying to talk about legislation that's been passed?
It's just more crazy partisan politics. We have a job to do. I'm doing my job. The president's doing his job, and the results are all around us.
The Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, interviewed by Taylor Popolars, national political reporter for Spectrum News in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The reporter posting that clip on his account on X. Story from CNN, Donald Trump will not be sentenced on his business fraud conviction until September. A New York judge ruled Tuesday in the wake of Monday's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. The delay in sentencing means that the former president is likely to escape any concrete punishment for his felony conviction during the summer, at the same time that Trump's election bid has been boosted by President Joe Biden's debate flop that has Democrats wondering whether to replace their nominee. Trump was scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th. Judge Juan Merchan said the former president will now be sentenced on September 18th, quote, if such is still necessary. That was the story from CNN. Lindsay McPherson, Washington Times reporter, posting on X. The Virginia Board of Elections certified State Senator John McGuire as the winner of the 5th Congressional District Republican primary. He defeated Congressman Bob Good by 374 votes, a 0.6% margin that falls within the threshold for a candidate-financed recount, which Mr. Good plans to pursue. This is Washington Today. President Biden today spoke about the heat UPI story reads, the White House on Tuesday proposed new rules to protect workers toiling in extreme weather conditions. If finalized, the new proposed Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, rule would create the first ever federal safety standard for employees exposed to excessive heat conditions. The White House said would impact 36 million workers and substantially reduce heat injuries, illnesses, and workplace deaths. The article from UPI, President Biden was at the D.C. Emergency Operations Center.
Summer has just started. Already, tens of millions of Americans are under heat warnings from record-shattering temperatures. Last month here in D.C., temperature 100 degrees. In Phoenix, Arizona, 112 degrees. In Las Vegas, 111 degrees. Above normal temperatures also are expected for much of the country in July, especially in central and eastern United States. Extreme heat, this is, I think, going to surprise a lot of people, not you all. But extreme heat is the #1 weather-related killer in the United States. More people die from extreme heat than floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes combined. Say that again, combined. More people die from heat than those 3 other major issues. And look, right now we're also tracking Hurricane Beryl, which is passing through the Caribbean. It's the earliest time ever a dangerous Category 5 hurricane has been recorded in American history. People impacted islands and communities are in our prayers, and we stand by to provide assistance to them. Look, extreme weather events drive home a point that I've been saying for so long. Ignoring climate change is deadly and dangerous and irresponsible. These climate-fueled extreme weather events don't just affect people's lives, they also cost money, they hurt the economy, and they have a significant negative psychological effect on people. Last year, the largest weather-related disasters cost over, get this, $90 billion in damages in America. $90 billion in damages. That's the cost so far, last year. They drove nearly 2.5 million people out of their homes, from Hawaii to Vermont. These events also pose serious threats to our nation's transportation system, to our power grid, farms, fisheries, and forests. In each case, costing lives and costing money. And the impacts we're seeing are only going to get worse, get more frequent, more ferocious, hitting our most vulnerable people in the most hardest hit communities in the world. Look, we can change all that. It's within our power. That's why today I'm announcing 5 new actions my administration is taking to address extreme weather, including heat and other hazards. The first, the Department of Labor is proposing a new rule that, when finalized, will establish the nation's first ever federal safety standard for excessive heat in the workplace. This includes things like developing response plans to heat illness, training employees and supervisors, implementing rest breaks, access to shade and water. You'd think we'd have to tell people access to shade and water. But, gradually easing new employees into heat environments. Across the country, workers suffer heat stroke or even die just doing their jobs. This new rule will substantially reduce heat injuries, illnesses, and deaths for over 36 million workers to whom it will apply, from farm workers to construction workers, postal workers, manufacturing workers, and so much more. I want to thank Vice President Harris for the work she has done since she was in the United States Senate that led to this rule.
President Joe Biden at the Washington, D.C. Emergency Operations Center, joined by the Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, and the Administrator of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Deanne Criswell, and others. He mentioned 5 steps, a few of the others: $1 billion in grants to expand tree and green spaces in urban areas, $7 billion to expand the wildland firefighting workforce, along with new technology to help battle wildfire. And as for that proposed heat rule, a Washington Post article reads, the rule doesn't cover everyone. Sedentary employees are exempt from the protections, as are those in indoor job sites kept below 80 degrees, emergency response workers, and remote employees. And because OSHA regulations do not extend to public employees, the regulation won't apply to government workers and public school teachers, many of whom are confronting increasingly high temperatures in school buildings without air conditioning. And the article also says some businesses and industry groups are gearing up for a battle over the regulation many see as burdensome, redundant, and expensive. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, posting today on X, great news, Biden's disastrous pause on LNG export permitting has been struck down. Unleashing U.S. natural gas creates good jobs, boosts our economy, lowers global emissions, and strengthens U.S. and allies' national security. A federal court on Monday night approved a request from Republican-led states to stop that pause while legal challenges are working their way through the courts. President Biden announced in January he was pausing approval of new permits to export LNG to countries that do not have free trade agreements with the U.S., while the Energy Department reviews the effects of the exports on climate, the economy, and national security. Senator Cassidy posted this video.
Great news. A federal judge struck down the Biden administration's pause on constructing LNG export facilities. Now let's count the ways why the Biden administration was wrong. Number one, according to the judge, they didn't have a legal foot to stand upon. Number two, by putting a pause in place, it killed thousands of great-paying construction jobs in Louisiana and elsewhere. Number three, it strengthens our economy when countries buy our goods and send us their money. Number four, it actually decreases global greenhouse gas emissions when they use our natural gas instead of their coal. Number five, it pushes back on Russia, who otherwise would be selling their gas to these countries and using their money to attack us, to attack others. It weakens them, it strengthens us. I've got five, I could go a lot more. It's pretty good. Let's be very thankful for a federal judge following the law. Let's hope the Biden administration starts to do so.
Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, posting that video on his X account. At the White House news conference, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre also reacting to the judge's order.
Next, I want to express our disappointment in yesterday's district ruling, which blocked our temporary pause on pending approvals of liquefied natural gas exports. While congressional Republicans and their allies continue to deny the very existence of climate change, President Biden is committed to combating the climate crisis with every resource available. That is why we will continue taking action to transition to a clean energy future and reduce emissions, creating good, paying, clean energy jobs, and bolster resilience to the impacts of extreme weather.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. The Biden administration, writes AP, said Tuesday that it was providing $504 million in implementation grants for a dozen technology hubs in Ohio, Montana, Nevada, and Florida, among other locations. The money would support the development of quantum computing, biomanufacturing, lithium batteries, computer chips, personal medicine, and other technologies. The Democratic administration is trying to encourage more technological innovation across the country instead of allowing it to be concentrated in a few metro areas such as San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, and New York City. That was the story from AP, the money coming from the CHIPS and Science Act from 2 years ago. Senator Jon Tester, Democrat from Montana, put out a video about the $41 million his state is getting.
Hey folks, Senator Jon Tester here to bring you some very, very good news for Montana. Today I'm excited to announce that Montana's Headwaters Tech Hub has been awarded critical Phase 2 funding. This is a big deal and a huge testament to the hard work of the folks that put this proposal together. I fought hard to get the Montana Headwaters Tech Hub funded because I know it is going to create good-paying jobs in our state and give Montana's top-notch entrepreneurs the tools they need to solve the world's most pressing tech and national security challenges. Too often, folks underestimate the power of rural America, and this funding is a vital step forward to put Montana on the front lines of innovation, harnessing the power of cutting-edge research, business, and technology in our great state that will help America stay ahead of foreign competitors like China. From securing the amendment in a law to counter China through science and technology that made this project possible, to landing the Tech Hub designation for Montana last fall, to this new infusion of funding, I have been proud to support the Headwaters Tech Hub every step of the way. This is no small feat and was made possible by the tireless work of Montana small businesses, local officials, and stakeholders. I know for a fact that Montana is up to the task, and I look forward to seeing the opportunities this project will continue to create for years to come.
Senator Jon Tester, Democrat from Montana, in a video. $51 million is going to Heartland Bioworks in Indiana, and Senator Todd Young, Republican of Indiana, posting on X. Today, Heartland Bioworks was one of the 12 tech hubs across the country to receive a funding award. Heartland Bioworks will solidify Indiana's place as a preeminent location for biotech innovation and manufacturing. Again, total of $504 million announced today, and other states getting the tech hubs: Colorado, New Mexico, Illinois, Nevada, New York, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. Wall Street today, the Dow up 162, NASDAQ up 149, S&P up 33. From USA Today, Moderna is set to receive $176 million in federal funding to develop a human vaccine against bird flu following outbreaks of the virus in dairy cows across several states, the Department of Health and Human Services announced Tuesday. Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
Welcome back to Washington Today. It's available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The Prime Minister of Haiti, Gary Conille, met with Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the State Department in Washington today. The Prime Minister has already made a stop in Miami and plans to go on to New York. He's visiting the U.S. as police officers from Kenya have arrived in Haiti to patrol the capital Port-au-Prince, which has been taken over by armed gangs the past year and a half. The U.S. is the main source of funding to pay for this multinational UN-approved mission.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to have Prime Minister Conille and to have Prime Minister Dupuy here and our colleagues from Haiti. This is an important time for Haiti. An important time for the many countries, including the United States, that strongly support Haiti. We have the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, a government in place, and we have the Transitional Presidential Council, which has been stood up, and we have the deployment now of the Multinational Security Support Mission to help the Haitian National Police regain full control of critical parts of Port-au-Prince and the country. All of this to ensure that Haiti can return to the path of having free and fair elections and making sure that as we move forward, the support for Haiti from the international community can go forward in the most robust way possible. The Prime Minister, his government, are leading Haiti at an absolutely critical time to be able to move all of this forward. But he comes to Washington with the strong support of the United States and the strong support of many other countries, both in the region that we share and well beyond, including, of course, our colleagues from Kenya, who are leading the Multinational Security Support Mission in this moment. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from the Prime Minister, from his team, about the steps forward to be taken as Haiti moves toward elections, and as we make sure that the environment in Haiti is strongly conducive to those elections, and also to making sure that support, assistance, development work can go forward in a way that clearly benefits the people of Haiti. As we're sitting here today, we're also tracking, of course, Hurricane Beryl, and the United States stands ready to assist any of our friends and partners who need assistance in the event the hurricane does any damage, but it's something that we're tracking very carefully. Prime Minister, welcome. So good to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. I think you framed it extremely well. While we're not underestimating the challenges that are ahead, we're extremely grateful for the support and solidarity of the American people, and we would like you to convey our gratitude to President Biden, who's been, of course, a strong champion for Haiti. We think the next few weeks and months will be quite interesting, but we're confident with the establishment of the Presidential Council, the establishment of this new government, we're going to be able to take on these challenges straight on. So again, thank you for hosting us here this afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the Prime Minister of Haiti, Gary Conille, today at the State Department in Washington. A Voice of America article this past weekend reads, in a video shared on social media, gang leader Jimmy Barbecue rallied armed men, telling them to fire on Kenyan police and pledging to fight to the death. I don't care if they are white or black, if they're not Haitian and they're on Haitian soil. They're invaders, he said. Over 500,000 people have fled their homes due to the violence, and around half the population is going hungry. That reporting from Voice of America. New York Times article, Israel's top generals want to begin a ceasefire in Gaza, even if it keeps Hamas in power for the time being, widening a rift between the military and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has opposed a truce that would allow Hamas to survive the war. The generals think that a truce would be the best way of freeing the roughly 120 Israelis still held, both dead and alive, in Gaza, according to interviews with 6 current and former security officials. Under-equipped for further fighting after Israel's longest war in decades, the generals also think their forces need time to recuperate in case a land war breaks out against Hezbollah, the Lebanese militia that's been locked in a low-level fight with Israel since October, multiple officials said. Reporting from the New York Times. This came up today at the U.S. State Department briefing with the deputy spokesperson Vedant Patel.
The New York Times is reporting that Israel's top generals want a ceasefire to start as soon as possible without Hamas having to be eliminated, that Hamas could still remain in power. They want to do this in order to, reportedly, to get the hostages out, which is something that everybody wants. Do you have a comment on that at all? And obviously this is no surprise given that we've seen IDF spokespeople come out and say Hamas cannot be defeated. And where is there anything that you can give us on?
So I'm just not going to offer analysis on the back and forth in terms of the negotiations and the assessments that might be ongoing as it relates to the ceasefire proposal. What I can say is that when President Biden laid this out a number of weeks ago, we made clear that this 3-phased approach that the UN Security Council endorsed, that Israel supported, is ultimately the best way to end the violence in Gaza and ultimately end the conflict. We believe that it is the best path to ensuring all the remaining hostages can be released. We think it's the best path to ensuring that humanitarian aid is able to get into Gaza. And so ultimately, Hamas has a choice here, and they have the opportunity to alleviate some of the suffering of the Palestinian people. And so I would echo what I said yesterday, is that the time for haggling is over and that there's a proposal that's on the table.
So that main goal of getting a ceasefire does not require immediate defeat of Hamas.
We have been pretty clear also that we do not want to see Hamas in charge of Gaza anymore. The secretary was clear about this at the Brookings Institution yesterday, and beyond that, it's something that he laid out last fall when talking about certain principles that the United States views as non-starters when we're talking about the day after this conflict ends. And a key tenet of that, of course, is Gaza no longer being a springboard for terrorism against the Israeli people, and Hamas no longer being the governing authority there either.
State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel at a press conference at the State Department in Washington. The United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator for Gaza, reports AFP, said Tuesday that 1.9 million people, 80% of the territory's population, were now displaced, adding she was deeply concerned by reports of new evacuation orders for Khan Yunis. Sigrid Kaag spoke to the United Nations Security Council meeting today in New York City.
With summer temperatures soaring and severe shortages of basic services such as waste management, sanitation facilities, and water supplies, the specter of outbreaks of infectious and communicable diseases looms large. Following the Israeli offenses against Rafah since the 6th of May, over 1 million people have been displaced once again, desperately seeking shelter and safety. 1.9 million people are now displaced across Gaza. I'm deeply concerned about reports of new evacuation orders issued into the area of Khan Yunis. Its impact on the civilian population is deep. In Gaza, nowhere is safe. Behind every statistic, Mr. President, is a human story of hope, dignity, and aspirations. And in my visits to Gaza, I am met with voices that echo a single heart-wrenching question: will our suffering ever end? Mr. President, it cannot be repeated often enough. We need an immediate, full and complete ceasefire in Gaza. We demand the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages and unimpeded and continuous access to deliver aid at scale throughout the Gaza Strip, in line with Security Council Resolution 2735. International humanitarian law and international human rights law must be respected by all. Protection of civilians remains the paramount priority. UNRWA must be allowed to deliver on its mandated role.
Sigrid Kaag, United Nations Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza, addressing the United Nations Security Council at the UN in New York City. Story from Reuters: the United States will soon announce more than $2.3 billion in new security assistance for Ukraine, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said on Tuesday during a meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart at the Pentagon. Austin also gave a nod to Ukraine's aspirations to eventually join NATO more than 2 years after Russia's full-scale invasion. At next week's NATO summit in Washington, D.C., Austin said, "We will take steps to build a bridge to NATO membership for Ukraine." He did not elaborate. That was the article from Reuters. Here is Secretary Austin.
Well, good morning, Minister Umerov, and welcome back to the Pentagon. Rustem, it was great to see you in Brussels 3 weeks ago for the 23rd meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. Thanks for your close and continuing partnership. Now, Ukraine is in a tough fight and has been ever since the start of Putin's reckless war of choice. The Kremlin continues to intensify its bombardment of your cities and civilians. But I continue to be impressed by the skill of your forces, and your troops continue to fend off Russia's attacks with grit, ingenuity, and courage. So make no mistake, Ukraine is not alone, and the United States will never waver in our support. Alongside some 50 allies and partners, we'll continue to provide the critical capabilities that Ukraine needs to push back Russian aggression today and to deter Russian aggression tomorrow. And I am proud that the United States will soon announce more than $2.3 billion in new security assistance for Ukraine. This package, under presidential drawdown authority, will provide more air defense interceptors, anti-tank weapons, and other critical munitions from U.S. inventories. It will also enable the United States to procure more Patriot NASAMS, air defense interceptors, which will be provided on an accelerated timeline by the resequencing of deliveries for some foreign military sales. Now, as we look ahead to the NATO summit next week, Rustem, we'll take steps to build a bridge to NATO membership for Ukraine. Just weeks ago, President Zelensky and President Biden signed a crucial 10-year bilateral security agreement. And that reflects our strong and enduring support for Ukraine. So I look forward to discussing more ways to meet Ukraine's immediate security needs and to build a future force to ward off more Russian aggression.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon today with the Ukrainian Minister of Defense. The U.S. has provided Ukraine with more than $50 billion of military aid since Russia's invasion in 2022. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said that he does not expect that NATO's 32 members will invite Ukraine to join at next week's summit in Washington, while the two countries, Russia and Ukraine, are still at war. Stoltenberg has said he hopes to show Ukraine that it is moving closer to membership. Story from Kyoto News in Japan. The U.S. Air Force on Tuesday resumed flights of its Ospreys in Japan after suspending them following a fatal crash of one of its tilt-rotor aircraft off a southwestern Japanese island in November, a Defense Ministry official said. The U.S. Marine Corps has already resumed the operation of its MV-22s in Japan since March, days after the lifting of a worldwide flight ban on the U.S. Ospreys that was imposed after the November 29th accident that killed all 8 airmen aboard a U.S. Air Force CV-22. Reporting from Kyoto News. The U.S. Marine Corps Commandant, General Eric Smith, was asked today during a program at the Brookings Institution in Washington about the state of Marine Corps aircraft, and during his response, he gave high marks to the Ospreys.
Our MV-22 squadrons are in good shape. We've lifted the red stripe. They're They're the most tested aircraft we have. They're completely safe. They have a better safety record than most aircraft.
And later in this program at the Brookings Institution, a reporter asked General Smith about how he characterized the Osprey's record.
You made a claim here that it's absolutely safe. I need to push back here, given the events of the last 2.5 months where 4 aircraft and 20 service members were killed, and bipartisan criticism of the program. The clutch is being redesigned after knowing about these issues since 2010, and it can't fly its full envelope emissions until middle of next year. So what's the basis for completely safe? And thank you for being here, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tony. So the aircraft no airframe is completely safe. I mean, every airframe can have a malfunction. Every airframe can have pilot error. Every airframe can have a mechanical malfunction due to design flaws or due to workmanship. But the MV-22 is a safe airplane. Its mishap rate per 100,000 flight hour is equal to or less than any airframe we've flown, than our 53s, than our 46s. It is a dynamic aircraft, as you know. I mean, it converts from full airplane mode to helicopter mode, which is a unique challenge, and it brings with it unique engineering challenges. But I stand by, the aircraft is completely safe. No aircraft is immune from mechanical problems or from pilot error. But the aircraft is safe for flight, and I'll fly in it today.
May I ask one follow-up? What missions can it not perform today that it has to wait for a redesigned clutch? Could it do a full NEO into Lebanon if needed?
Yes, it could. So it can conduct any mission that it's designed to conduct. It needs to be within a certain number of minutes from a landing spot until we get the full green light to fly unrestricted missions again, which we're working toward. And we largely have gotten that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Marine Corps Commandant General Eric Smith at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., getting a question from Bloomberg defense reporter Tony Capaccio. An article from TheHill.com in late May says that 4 families of Marines who died in the 2022 V-22 Osprey crash in California have filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the manufacturers of the military aircraft, accusing the companies of not disclosing known safety issues to the Pentagon. The U.S. House and Senate not in session for the 4th of July holiday week, but some news from Congressman Michael McCaul, chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Axios reports that President Biden's former press secretary Jen Psaki will sit for an interview this month in the committee's probe into U.S. military's exit from Afghanistan, according to a letter from a lawyer to the panel obtained by Axios. Congressman McCaul set to release a report on Biden's U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan before the November 5th election, and Axios says it could contain potentially damaging information about the withdrawal, which included the deaths of 13 U.S. soldiers in a bombing at the Kabul airport. Congressman Al Green, Democrat from Texas, posting today on X, today marks 60 years since the Civil Rights Act was signed into law by President LBJ, prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Although we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go to achieve liberty and justice for all. President Johnson spoke to the nation on television the day he signed the bill, July 2nd, 1964.
We believe that all men are created equal, yet many are denied equal treatment. We believe that all men have certain unalienable rights, yet many Americans do not enjoy those rights. We believe that all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty, yet millions are being deprived of those blessings, not because of their own failures, but because of the color of their skin. The reasons are deeply embedded in history and tradition and the nature of man. We can understand without rancor or hatred how this all happened, but it cannot continue. Our Constitution, the foundation of our republic, forbids it. The principles of our freedom forbid it. Morality forbids it. And the law I will sign tonight forbids it.
Former President Lyndon Johnson giving a televised address on this day 60 years ago, the day he signed the Civil Rights Act into law, 1964. Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, posting 60 years ago today, the Civil Rights Act was signed into law. This landmark legislation supports the belief that all men are created equal. Today, we celebrate the progress we've made to become a more perfect union. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, Word for Word. You'll get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.